Hi, I'm John McElroy. Today we're going to be talking about chips, not the chip shortage. We're going to be talking about the technology that goes into chips and where they go in cars. And joining me for the discussion is Bill Stewart. He's the Senior Director of Vehicle Automation and Chassis at Infineon. And Bill, I didn't know this before. Infineon's actually the largest chip supplier to the automotive industry.
Yeah, chips have grown and Infineon has grown tremendously. Automotive makes over 50% of our revenue. And when you think about a car, there's over 1,500 chips in a vehicle on average. So it's a pretty significant business.
Let's talk about the future. And of course, these days in the automotive industry, the future, it's all about electrification and autonomy. Mm-hmm. What role do chips play in those cars now? Maybe not autonomy, no, we're not quite there yet. But what role do chips play right now in certainly electric cars, and what role will they play in the future?
Well, chips are more than just the processors you think of in your laptops and cell phones. When you look at an EV, the amount of electronics doubles going from a traditional ICE vehicle to an EV. You have sensors which are used to monitor the battery state, monitor how much current is flowing to the motor to ultimately determine your speed. You have other power electronics which are used to convert that battery energy into your ultimate motion down the freeway. You also have a lot of other devices within the vehicle, and with electrification comes electrified steering systems, electrified braking systems, and so ultimately these devices are very unique for automotive. They're not built, they're built for unique environmental and quality conditions, which makes it not easy to swap out for other types of components. When we look at autonomous systems, you have sensors from your radars, your cameras, which input a lot of data. They have to compute that data and then ultimately determine where the vehicle should go. Even in a highway pilot system like we have today, you will have those types of sensors that are needed to control your throttle, control your braking, and do it in a safe manner.
So if electric cars double the amount of chips that go into a vehicle compared to an ICE vehicle, what's an autonomous one do?
Well, I think that's still to be determined.
But it's more.
It's more. When you look at the research systems that are on the road today, it's a lot. Ultimately, to scale at a high volume production, it's not going to be another doubling, but it will be an incremental increase.
Electric cars are really starting to catch on, but as you know, a big part of the public is still worried about the reliability of them. What role do chips play in the reliability of electric vehicles?
Yeah, so whether it's electrical vehicles or any vehicle, we like to say they require dependable electronics, and that's really what enables them, right? If your battery's gonna die when it gets cold, like your phone does, that's not gonna work, right? If you have a radar sensor that doesn't work when it rains, that's not gonna work, right? So you ultimately need all of these systems to build trust with the consumer and trust with the driver. And this is one of the things we actually noticed a market trend a couple years ago, where whether it was electrification or autonomy, we saw customers change from just being a technology race to also be a trust race. And so what we have done and what we try to focus on is building products with high levels of security, quality, and functional safety in order to basically ensure that the driver trusts the vehicle and they do accept it.
As electric technology matures, I'm sure it's going to become even more reliable. Yes. So let's project out a little bit. Talk to me about reliability today. Reliability 2035 and then mid-century 2050.
Yeah, so I think it's how you define reliability. It used to be just quality, right? So you don't want this part to fail in the vehicle, right? That was how we used to define quality. And when you look at chips, we measure our quality in parts per billion, right? So we're not talking a couple parts per thousand, but we're talking over a 20-year lifetime. We're in the 1 to 2 to 20 billions of failures per billion chips we sell. So when you think about the number of chips we produce in a year, that's all but 3 seconds of our production will not have a failure.
You make all these chips all year long, and the only ones that fail represent 3 seconds worth of production. That's an amazing stat.
So, but that's only one part of it, right? One part is, does the hardware fail, right? But these chips are in systems. They have software running on them. They're interacting with their environment, right? So it's not as simple as just, is the device we provide good enough? We have to look at other aspects. So, one of the things we look at is functional safety, and that's a big aspect we promote. Functional safety is basically, does the device perform its intended function, or does the system able to recover when it experiences an issue? And how we measure that is based on what's called failures in time. So essentially, will this occurrence or failure happen for every billion hours of operation? So again, we're talking about rare events, but ultimately, if we want to talk about autonomous vehicles that customers trust, or electric vehicles that customers trust, that's the type of reliability we have to shoot for.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, when we look at that type of measurement, it's not just about detecting or preventing this type of failure to occur. We have to understand, a vehicle over its lifetime is going to have issues. There's no way to prevent that. The question is, what happens when those issues occur? And there's a few things we do. One is we put devices or mechanisms in our parts so that we're able to diagnose these issues either before they happen or when they do happen, be able to issue a correction. So for example, for memory, we can actually, if you have corrupted memory, fix the corruption. Or we put redundant systems in. So kind of like in an airline, right? If you lose an engine, you don't want the plane to go down. So sometimes it's putting redundant features in our devices. So if you lose one, you can basically notify the driver that they need to take it in for repair.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so let's take that out to 2035.
Yes.
How's that different than today and maybe, like I said, mid-century?
So I think it's coming back to that. We look at these in two aspects. One is, what is the likelihood, and that gets back to that failures in time. The other is the impact. And so when we look at today, most of the vehicles today, the impact is not terribly negative, right? It might be an inconvenience. Your steering system might be harder to use. Your radio might not work. Those are all problems, but they're inconveniences. Mm-hmm. We also have to look at what could cause a potential fatality, right? So when you talk about autonomous vehicles, obviously there's been a lot in the news about whether it's pedestrians getting hit or cars causing accidents, right? There's a much level higher of impact there. Mm-hmm. And that's where these mechanisms become more important, and we have to add more of them. Not just in our devices, but working with our customers to develop things at a system level to where, you have two different paths. You have these redundant paths. How does our devices interact with our customers and their software to be very cost efficient and also ultimately be safe and trustworthy for the drivers?
So it'll get better in the future
yes,
still.
Absolutely.
I mean, as good as it is now, even better still.
There's different levels of safety required based on the application. And so if you have a autonomous vehicle, a level 4 fully autonomous, that's a completely different target of safety than it is for a regular, we'll call it a level 1 vehicle today.
Okay, so there's that functional safety aspect.
Yes.
Cybersecurity.
Yes.
Everybody's worried about cybersecurity. Yes. There's more and more computers coming into cars. Mm-hmm. What role can your chips play in making cars safe from cyber attacks?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, you don't talk about autonomous vehicles in their isolation. They're called connected autonomous vehicles, right? And that's because they're connected to the internet. They're connected to an external network. And even most of our cars today have a modem where we can play our radio stations or download over-the-air updates. Those are becoming standard features. And one of the things that we look at with security is while chips have things like hardware security modules and different types of encryption features, security is ultimately a property of the vehicle and of the system design. And so what we provide are hardware anchors and what we call roots of trust, which basically provide a known component that the vehicle can trust. They say this is secure, so if someone tries to hack, it has to match what this root of trust says. That's the layman's way to say it. Ultimately, though, that's not enough, right? You have to design the system in such a way that it takes advantage of this hardware. And so we work with our customers to do that and provide the software to run on it across the entire vehicle so that it can be used efficiently and securely.
Okay, you mentioned autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite topic of all. When will Infineon chips allow me to be driven around in a level 4 or even a level 5 autonomous car?
So I think we have to define it in terms of use case, right? Because it's going to be a long ways off before our kids don't need driver's licenses. Much as that sounds great, it's going to be a while. I think there's two scenarios which are really kind of running in parallel. One is the regular passenger cars that we all drive, and those are going to have the highway pilots, the urban pilot type scenarios that we see already in production today. Those are going to migrate from just the high-end vehicles through the entire fleet. That's one of the things when we look at, I think even OEMs have been surprised about the consumer adoption and demand. And one of the reasons we have such high demand for chips today is the take rates of all these features are so much higher than was planned just a couple years ago. The other scenario are, autonomous delivery services, shuttles in an urban environment, where there has to be a business case around it, right? You could develop a L4 vehicle today and deploy it. It is not economically feasible. And so what we're seeing is, okay, if I'm a store or a business and I want to expand my market to other consumers, having an autonomous delivery service is a way to do that. Another trend we see is, almost as a public transportation alternative in urban environments, having autonomous shuttles where cities can invest in infrastructure is a way to make them more reliable and get them to market quickly. So those we're going to see over the next few years really grow in adoption, probably in unique environments. But I think, the full deployment of every vehicle being L4, L5, that's still a ways off. So.
I'll wait. I can't wait,
Okay.
but I will wait.
Okay.
Bill Stewart, thanks so much for your time. Very interesting what you're all doing here at Infineon.
Thank you.